All right.
Okay.
Hi guys. We're recording now. This is Dave Sheik. I'm here with Jen. We're doing these videos every week or so, or whenever we feel called to make them. We kind of pick a topic, kind of go over our life experiences and how we perceive our experience of it. And today's topic, we're going to be kind of talking about divine timing and how in my own experience, some of the things I've done, um, my perception of how things were going, how it didn't work or it wasn't working. And now that I'm here, like, first of all, I got to tell you, I'm in my pickup. This is kind of my church. It's my sacred ground. And right now I'm looking over the water. Like, it's a beautiful sunny day. Like, it's always so perfect. So that's the energy I come in with. So Jen, what do you got to add today?
So when I started thinking about divine timing,
Hmm.
I actually looked up the definition of what that might mean, and I put in divine timing definition, and it like had no results. And so I laughed because I was like, well, and then below, of course, it gives you some suggested other things. Google kind of does that, and it said divine timing meaning. And so I looked up the meaning of divine timing. So I'm going to pull that up really quick. So I
Awesome.
saved it. I'll learn how to do a screen share where I can share like graphics and stuff, but I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. So I'm just
I
going to
I
read
do
it.
I do believe you could copy and paste it in the comments below, for the future,
Oh, okay. Well,
and we'll talk about that later.
yeah, I think I have to go to it on my computer somewhere and then do it.
Hmm.
And I guess we'll just practice as we go, however that looks.
Absolutely.
So I'm just going to read it here from my phone. I took a screenshot of the definition, and it just says divine timing is the belief that everything that happens in your life occurs at precisely the right moment.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, I think with divine timing, we often, it's kind of like one of those aha moments, or it's what's it called? A
Epiphany.
miracle, a miracle,
Yeah.
or an epiphany. We look at it as like it's a miracle because something we wanted all of a sudden magically just shows up, or we think it's magical, right? And
Well, it
in
kind of
reality,
is.
it is magical. It's divine timing, right?
Yeah.
And it's what I perceive divine timing to mean is that I've I have something I want, and I put it out in the universe, a thought or a even a material thing, a car, a house, whatever it is. I put that out into the universe, and then I build the energy around it such that at some point it manifests, and then I call it divine timing because it appears in my life at perfectly the right time, right?
Yep.
Um, and so, how do we? I don't really know if I have. What am I trying to say here? Divine timing is just sort of how do I rely on the divine timing for things to appear exactly when they need to appear versus be a manifester, or a creator and be like, I'm going to just go out, I'm going to work really hard, and I'm going to create this thing. So I feel like they kind of both play in hand, right?
Hmm.
Like we don't just sit around and wait for something to appear. So we're kind of in
Yep.
the same respect talking about manifestation. And that's kind of
For
where my
sure.
brain went as I was thinking about divine timing is, I can
Yep.
often be really passionate about creating something,
Hmm.
but I also know that it appears at the perfect time, at divine timing. That manifestation of whatever it is I'm creating has its own divine timing. It shows up exactly when it needs to show up or gets to show up. But how do
So
I
when we
how do I like how am I okay with what happens between the time a thought comes to me about something I want to create versus the divine timing when it actually appears? Because I guess I'm kind of seeing divine timing as the thing appears in its own perfect divine timing. Is that what you're kind of seeing?
I kind of I'm
Are you following with what I'm trying to say here?
I am. Here comes a train. I hope that's not too loud.
No, it's fine.
Um, for me, when I kind of think of divine timing, what I've experienced um, is not always just the what I might perceive to be good, the things I want. It's also the things that I didn't know that I was calling into my space, the lessons I didn't know that I wanted, and at the time I definitely didn't want. So let's say it
But
was
it came, but the reason it
it
came right when it did is because it was opening up something else for you. So it was
yep,
perfect that it happened when it did, such that
yep.
this other thing could show up, right?
a, a great example of that is I had some businesses out in North Dakota, and they just things were ending, and because of that ending, it allowed me to take on the set of trainings that I took on where I met you. And because of those trainings, I learned to start really looking at my life and doing this. At that time, oh, I was in victim mode. Oh boy, I would tell everybody all the dirty details. And now I'm like, well, why? That energy doesn't work because that was perfect. Had that not happened, I wouldn't be here today. And I can tell you, the dollar amount that I was making was a lot more back then. But the peace that I had within my soul is so much. I'm going to use the word cleaner. Like my, I just feel clean. And some of the business practices out where I worked was, it's not that they were wrong or just, maybe it was the amount of hours you had to work or some of the chemicals you had to breathe in. Just some of those things just they didn't align with my soul. And I didn't know because I was making such good money. I was more or less compromising my morals to get there. So now that I've been able to see that and pull myself out of that environment and really go in deep and look at the whys behind everything that I was doing, I could see, gosh, now I won't go back to that. It just doesn't serve. So
Well, and I think that comes back to the basic concept that I always talk about. And this is, what is it that I'm looking for,
yep,
right? What is it that I'm looking for in my life? And what are the results that come from, my actions from the thing I'm looking for to then? Because you were getting results, right? You were making money in North Dakota.
yep,
But what were you compromising in order to have that result, right? So if it
yep,
wasn't in complete alignment with who you were, then you were like compromising. You might be getting a certain result, but was it worth what you were compromising to get it? And so
no,
I feel like most people don't really, and I hate to say most people. Uh-oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Okay, we'll just pretend like it's good. There
yeah,
might be a
it's
few
a little
people on the
choppy.
internet. Um,
It's a little choppy, but
are you
we'll
having a
get
hard
through it.
time hearing me, or are we okay? A
We'll
little
be
bit
okay,
hard.
I think.
Okay. Um, I always say to take a look at what result you'd like to achieve, right? If
Yep.
money is the thing, you also have to go. That's okay. It's not bad to go after money, right?
Hmm.
But like you were saying, what did I have to compromise in order to get that thing that I wanted? And was it worth it to me?
Yep.
If it's not worth it to you, then it's time to take a look. Like you said, I was like, I'm going to go do this other thing and see what kind of results I get from this other thing that I'm choosing into. And
Hmm.
it's not necessarily right or wrong the next thing you chose. It was just a choice. You just chose to go this certain direction with this certain
Yep.
thing, and you're looking at the results that it's created for you. And what I heard you saying is, I thought that money was going to bring me the peace and happiness, because then I would have all this money and I could just do whatever I wanted to do, and then therefore I'd have peace and happiness. And in reality, when you shifted something, and you're like, because I feel like a lot of people, their ultimate goal is just to find peace and happiness no matter what they're doing, right?
Yep.
And oftentimes, if we're compromising to get what we think is going to bring us peace and happiness, we're not going to find it because we've compromised, or we've gone against what our soul is calling us towards, or saying
Yeah.
that would work better for us based on what it is we actually want. Because our soul hears our unspoken words too. And it's like it's always listening for those cues as to what it is we want. We do a lot of self-talk, and our soul is hearing all of
Yeah.
that. And so even though we're not saying it out loud, we're like, oh, we think that the money is what's going to bring us the happiness. And so what I'm really trying to say, bottom line, is all of us are really looking for peace and happiness. And those moments of divine timing tend to often bring us that peace and happiness we're looking for. But
Yeah.
oftentimes we're not really. So we also talked about being in gratitude for divine timing, because you were saying
Yep.
that sometimes those negative things are actually divine in their timing, because they
Yep.
lead us to the real thing that we're actually looking for, right?
Yeah.
And so how do
Does
we
that,
be grateful for the negative things that appear to be divine timing, such that when we have that aha divine timing moment where we're like, oh, I feel peace, I feel joy, I feel happiness, this is divine timing. How can we look at every experience or every opportunity we have in life and see it as divine, see it
yeah.
as perfectly timed?
Right. Well, maybe people have heard of them. They're called the Four Agreements. This is actually one of the ways I live my life by. And one of them is don't take anything personal. So let's say, Jen, you say something to me. Um, you were having a rough day. You say something to me and I took it personal. Well, that was my choice, I feel, to take it personal. And what you said actually had nothing to do with me. So what I'm getting at here is when I stop taking things personal and I just live my life and my experience, I realize that even as I go through my days, whatever happens, there's a lesson in everything, on every friendship, relationship, whether whatever that work relationship, romantic relationship, friendship relationships, I have a lesson to learn in just about everything. If it's a positive experience, great. If it's a negative, there's even a lesson there. And so, yeah, absolute gratitude. I feel one of the things that I've really benefited from were the relationships that, especially romantic relationships. I actually personally believe that we are wired to have romantic relationships just to inspire growth, and which means experiences that we might deem as tough or bad or wrong or however we want to label them, but just opportunities to grow if we choose to see them. So, and as I look through my past, my history of relationships, I look at each one with a different type of gratitude because it's gotten me here to this piece. Um,
I'm
and I
actually
guess what,
glad. I guess I'm actually glad you're bringing up relationships, because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. And
okay.
I feel like um, a lot of people. I mean, we're always in relationships, right? We're
Hmm.
either in relationships with people in our family, we're in a romantic relationship, we're
Yep.
in a friendship relationship, we're in a relationship with our money, we're in a relationship with our job, we're in a relationship with the people at our job.
Yeah.
So we're
Hmm.
in relationships with all kinds of things. And so I
Yeah.
love the topic of relationships, especially when it comes to divine timing. And also when it comes to romantic partnerships, because oftentimes as humans, and I hope I'm not derailing you from your thought, because
No,
I
you're
kind of
fine.
did, but when it comes to these relationships, like you said, they are all about teaching us um, more about who we are, right?
Hmm.
And so it's important for us to have that experience, have those experiences. Maybe they don't always turn out the way we want them to, um,
Hmm.
but it's important for our growth, like you were saying, um, so that we can find out more about who we are, so that we
Hmm.
can show up better in those relationships, right?
So, I'm going to share a little bit of my history. Throughout some of the breakups that I've done, I turned to coping mechanisms. Mine happened to be alcohol during breakups. There was a stretch of time where I could not tell you one breakup that I had that there wasn't a couple of weeks that I didn't drink excessively. And one, it's not healthy for my body. It's just it was toxic. So then I had uh, a couple relationships in the last couple of years that I haven't drank. Like okay, the relationship's over. I'm not going to drink for this long because in my history, this was a coping mechanism. I would stuff those feelings. I would hide it. I would completely numb out so I didn't actually experience it. Well, if I didn't experience it, I didn't grow. So as I go through this experience, I ask myself, well, what other things am I using as coping mechanisms? Whether it's alcohol, some use food, some people use extreme sports. Like any a wise friend of mine said, any person, place, or thing that we use to escape reality is basically a drug. So what am I using to basically stop my own growth? Because when I choose into something like that, that's all I'm doing. And it that's in itself is an awesome, wonderful experience. But I now choose a little different. So I just encourage people to take a look at that. If there are things in your life that you might, I don't want to say avoidance with, but it's easier to deal with if you're doing this or this. Like, and I go to the extreme. One of mine is driving, and I have driven all over this country, more than most. And I realized, well, that's kind of my numbing out. I hit the road, put some music on, put some Tony Robbins, something good. Like, it just gets me out of my head. Sometimes that serves, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's really good to look at what's going on and say, gosh, there's a real lesson here. What am I learning?
Yeah, for sure. I like to talk about divine timing in relationships.
Oh, okay.
You know, I mean, because we have been doing that, right? We've been
Yep,
talking
for
about
sure.
divine timing, and then when it comes to relationships, it's which one do we want to focus on? I mean, we could focus on personal relationships or our intimate relationships, so I can speak to that. I've had a few of those. I'm trying to be careful about how I say it, but everything has divine timing if we're willing to look at it. You know what I mean? Like, so when I was going down this path of divine timing, I started thinking about some of the lessons I've learned that were divine to me in the timing of it. Recently, I'm, without like giving all the details of how I learned this, but I kind of want to tell the story. I'll just tell it in the best way that I know how. I had an opportunity to be a character, if you will, in a what you would think would be like a silent movie. Remember the old silent movies, the black and white movies where the character didn't say anything, but it told this whole big story, right?
Yep.
I had an opportunity recently to take a look at myself in that situation. So I was the character that got to not speak, but I got to tell a story. Okay, so I had an opportunity to do this. And
wow.
One of the biggest lessons I learned in this opportunity was how to play full out. Like, how do I know if I'm leaning all the way in? How do I know if I'm playing all the way full out? Well, when you can't speak and the only thing you can do is actions or motions and do your best to tell a story with these actions or motions, that's as full out as you can get, right? Without speaking. Because oftentimes I love to talk. If you get me here, I can just go on and on about lots of different subjects. But for me to have an opportunity to not speak and yet do everything with my body as far as animation and action and whatever, I realized that through that experience, what I learned is that I absolutely can't be any more than all the way out. I can't play any more full out than what I played full out at. So oftentimes in my life, I would beat myself up because I could have done more, right? But in that situation, I couldn't do more than everything I had, right? Yep. And so oftentimes I think we beat ourselves up, or people in general beat themselves up for doing like, well, I could have done this, or I could have done that, or I should have done this. Well, coulda, woulda, shoulda. What did you do, right? I played full out. And so when I'm talking divine timing in this aspect, it was because I realized in that moment that I had still got my beat up stick out and I was still beating myself up saying I should have done more. And I'm like, I literally couldn't do it any different. I literally couldn't give more, especially when you're thinking with your physical body. You've been to this point where you've worked so hard, right? Where you're completely exhausted. You cannot give one more ounce of anything. You're just done. You know you played full out. You know there's nothing more you can give. You've done that last push-up to the point where you're like flat on your face, right? There's no more. There's no more. So why would I still, after all that no more, get out the beat up stick and be like, you should have done better? I realized in that moment, which was perfect for me, because then it was like, I have this measuring stick now, where especially in relationships, because I'm all about how much do you lean in those relationships, right? I can only lean in all the way. And only I know if I've leaned in all the way, right? Nobody else knows if I have or I haven't. Nobody else knows if I've withheld something back. Only I do. So for me in that moment, it was divine timing. Does that make sense as far as learning that lesson? Because now I know my limit, or I know when I've leaned in all the way. I can't lean in for anyone else. So let's just go there. I know you have a thought to add to that.
I got to add to this. The fourth agreement, always do your best. Now, my today's best, I'm well rested. I'm feeling phenomenal today. So my best, it's above par for compared to others. That's my personal best today. A couple days ago, I got 2 hours of sleep. My best would have been subpar. So know what your best is, and don't judge today's activities off of yesterday's results, because you're not the same. You're not in the same energy. You're not in the same health. You didn't eat the exact same food. You didn't get the exact same amount of rest. You've got different mental things going on, emotions. That plays a factor in everything we do with our best. So I have an RPM gauge. It's the revelations per minute in your motor, right? And man, sometimes you could just redline it all the way and you could push yourself to almost death. Trust me, I know. But then sometimes just idling, that's just cruise control. Maybe a cruise at 2,500 RPMs is it's your best, because sometimes the best thing for you is to go slow. So that's the huge thing about judgment on myself, and that beat up stick is it. I've learned how I beat myself up, because like you said, I've done something similar, and I've pushed myself to the point of collapsing, and then I got up and I did it again and I collapsed again. Well, why did I push myself? Because I wanted to do that, it was a choice. So I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I want to talk about the being all of who I am in a relationship, right? And how far I lean in, that I've given all that I can give. Now, if I'm in a relationship with someone and someone says, hey, I really need you to lean in more, right? And I've leaned in as far as I can lean, or hey, here's some more information. Like, what I really appreciate in relationships is someone to give me more information, because if I'm feeling like I'm leaning in as far as I can lean in, I don't know what else to do to improve this relationship. That's what I'm saying. Until I get feedback from the relationship, right? Saying, hey, this is what I need, or this is what I meant by what I said. I can't show up any different until I have some feedback, right? And that's in anything. That's in a job. That's in, so you're always looking at your feedback. You're always looking at, okay, I'm always looking at my feedback. I can't say that everyone is, because not everyone wants to take a look at their feedback because they want to stay ignorant to it or whatever. It's too hard to look at, right? And I know I've been there. I haven't wanted to look at my feedback sometimes, but one of the things that I have appreciated is the feedback. So now I'm like, please bring it on, give it to me, because more information that I have that I can arm myself with, and not to defend myself, but just so that I can show up better in the world. I can show up educated. I can show up kind. I can show up all these different ways. If I don't have any feedback as to how I'm actually doing with what information I have, then how can I show up any different or more, right? I can only be as more as I've played out. I can only do that one push-up as much as, and if you give me more information and be like, oh no, you're a badass, you can do one more, and someone feeds me, I may be able to, right? But what I'm saying is, like, I don't, until I have more information, I can't show up in a different way. And so that's
Well,
why
and
communication always is at the top of everyone's list when they talk about, I want a relationship, but I want one where I can really communicate well. Okay, communicate doesn't mean just you talk and I listen either. So
yeah.
we get to give that view of the back and forth. So.
Well, yeah, last video we did was your Know Your Truth. I think was the exact title of it. And when it comes to feedback, okay, the way you do relationships is probably completely different from the way I do. My relationships are done by a series of past events, and this is how I show up. This is the result I'm looking for. So this is how I act in a relationship to achieve said results. Now, you might come at a relationship with a different perspective because you might be looking for a different result. And the expectations get in the middle of it. And no,
yeah, and if I don't communicate what those expectations are, how can the other
thank you.
person even show up? Right?
That's exactly, yeah, that's exactly it. How could another person know your truth if you don't communicate that? And you know, it's
But I have
interesting
to figure
sometimes.
out what my truth is first,
This is
right?
true.
Because if I don't know what my truth is first, how do I communicate that to the other person? And sometimes it takes those relationships and being in those relationships for us to go, oh, that I thought that would work for me, but it really
Yeah.
doesn't. And so then
Yep.
I discovered what worked for me, what didn't work for me. But I didn't know until I had the opportunity to show up in that relationship. And
Yep.
so my goal in relationships isn't to like use people to find out what works for me. No, it's just a byproduct of being in a relationship. You learn what works for you and what doesn't based on
Yep.
having that experience, right? Because our experiences are actually what teaches us.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And there's that, you know, every time we fall in love, we're taking a risk. We're taking a risk that that person may or may not love us the way that we do. And is it a risk every time? Absolutely. Is it a chance to grow every time? Absolutely. But I feel that always taking that risk is always going to have a payoff of being open, being vulnerable. So no
Well,
matter,
if you can communicate your expectations too, which
yep,
isn't something we often do going right into a relationship. We're just like, hey, you're kind of cute. Let's hang out. Let's see how this goes, right? We don't actually stop and go, what is the purpose of me entering into this relationship? And what
yeah,
is the result I'm hoping to achieve? And let me communicate that to you. This is something I found that I have been doing a lot more lately, right up front. If I am approached by someone, I can tune into the energy of it right away. And I'll be like, okay, so what are you actually asking me? And let me tell you where I'm at so that we can either go further or not in this
yep,
relationship, because this is what I'm willing to do. And I feel like we know that as humans, we know right away where something is going. And if we're
yep,
unclear, it doesn't take long before we can say, oh, I feel this is going this way, and that's not really what I intended. If I'm tough enough to have that conversation and say, hey, I think this is going in a direction that I wasn't really expecting it to go. Let me make myself more clear about where I see this going. I think
yep.
that's really critical. And in fact, one of the things that, oh boy, I don't like it when it says that. Can you see that on your screen?
No, I can't see it, but I can hear it's a little chopped up. But the good news is you're talking, it's your internet and you're recording. So it's probably going to record
It'll show
just
that
fine.
when the recording probably. It
I
shows,
don't
it
know that
says,
it will.
it may or may not, but it just says my internet connection is unstable. So in those moments, I'm like, I'll just pause and wait for it to reconnect so I don't get like all cut off or whatever. I forgot where I was at, but just communicating in our relationships. Um, I facilitated several events, where partnership is involved, and that's one of my favorite things to do is partnerships. And often when people are choosing into a specific event in this partnership event, they don't even look at each other. They don't even say, "Hey, let's get in here and let's do this together. They don't say, okay, what is our goal? Let's get to this point. And I will often stop them and I'll be like, so I know you're doing this because this is an exercise we've challenged you to do, right? But have you really thought about what it is what result you're looking to achieve by actually stepping into this event? And who you're stepping into it with? And how often in relationships do we do that? Like I said, we just go, oh, well, you're kind of cute. Let's see where this goes. And then you end up getting all romantically involved or even sexually involved, which creates more emotions, right? Before you actually go, wait, did I tell you that I don't ever want to get married again? Or did I tell you that I do want to get married and I do want to have children? I had somebody recently say, this guy just offered up his information about how he doesn't want to have kids again. And I go, well, wouldn't you want to know that right away? If you're somebody who wants to have children and they don't, wouldn't that necessarily be a deal breaker in your relationship? Because if you're adamant about having more children and he's like, yeah, I've been fixed, I'm not having any more kids, that's probably not a relationship you want to pursue based on what result you're looking for. Why even waste your time? Do you know what I'm saying?
This is true.
So why not have those conversations? I'm appreciative of people when they come up to me and say, hey, this is where I'm at. Just want to let you know, because this is a thing that could be a deal breaker in a relationship, right? And how often do we not communicate that up front? But even before that, like I was saying, how important is it that you get clear on what works for you? Because even in this moment, I might think I know what works for me, but I might enter into a relationship and that relationship will say, they'll do or say certain things. And I'm like, oh, that does not work for me. And then I go, okay, we can either have a conversation about that and I can share my feelings and why, because I'm probably getting triggered, right? So it's not necessarily about the person that's triggering me. It's just that I was triggered by something they did or said. Doesn't mean they were wrong or they were bad. I was just triggered. So I look at that and I go, okay, when you did or said this thing, I was triggered. Why did that trigger me? It brought up something from my history. Well, I'm not holding you as my same person from my history. I'm just saying that triggered something in my history. That's something for me to look at and go, okay, I'm certain you didn't mean to trigger me, right? You weren't just trying to make me upset. I was triggered for whatever reason. And so now I get to take a look at and go, okay, well, and then I can even have a clarifying conversation. Well, did you mean to do that? This is what came up for me. I've done that in certain relationships and I've been like, I can't believe you would think I would do that to you. And I'm just like, oh, well, I didn't say you did it. I mean, you were clearly the one who triggered it, but it didn't say that it was your fault per se. It's just that I was triggered. And, you know, in order for us to have this relationship that works, you know, it would work for me if you didn't say it in that tone per se, but you came, you know, you still communicated clearly your wants and needs, but in a tone that was like, oh, I get where you're coming from. This is probably your history coming up. This isn't me. I just was the one who triggered it. To have a mature male be like, oh, yeah, I didn't do that. I was just triggering something for you. You have an opportunity to go back and look at that and see why. Am I explaining that clearly? Because I think a lot of times in relationships, we often blame the other person for triggering us. And it wasn't necessarily them. They triggered it. So we have an opportunity to look at it and clear up what works for us and what doesn't work for us in our space.
Well, and I actually think we're almost conditioned in society because it almost seems like anytime anybody does something that looks like it's on purpose, oh, well, now that person's a narcissist or that person's a liar or there's a label associated with that kind of behavior. And I don't even like those labels because we all have that within us. A good example is I hug guys. Well, some people would say, well, homosexuals hug guys, so that's a homosexual tendency, right? Well, no, I'm just hugging a guy. So let's say I do something that is labeled a narcissistic tendency. Well, am I a narcissist, or is that just a learned behavior that we all have experienced and I'm just going through my history? So like
Narcissism is a whole other topic that I could go on about for a long time, because I don't like to even throw that topic around very lightly. Because like you said, it's a label, right? And anytime we label somebody as narcissistic, we put them in a category and we say they can never, we can never change. They can, you know, if they have this certain tendency, then they must be. And it's just like, Well, it's just like if I get an illness and I've got chronic headaches. Well, I am now the chronic headache girl, right? She always has headaches. She always has an excuse why she wants to get out of whatever for whatever reason. And it's like, anyway, it's the same thing. Like now I have ownership over that thing and I'm labeled by that thing. And I try really hard not to label people. I may say they have a narcissistic personality or they're exhibiting narcissistic traits right now. That doesn't mean they are a narcissist, but this is a typical behavior of a narcissistic personality. I for a long time, honestly, just real briefly on narcissism, didn't believe that narcissism could be healed. But what I know about narcissism is that people who show narcissistic tendencies are often product of, like, when they were a child, they were shamed really harshly, and they can't deal with the shame that they faced as a child by either their mother or their father, or whoever it was that shamed them or left them or abandoned them. And so if that shame and that shame can be healed, then narcissistic tendencies will go away, because narcissism is just an extreme way of protecting yourself from the shame that you've experienced.
For sure.
However, it's really hard to get people to go there because shame is so shameful, right?
Yeah.
It's so painful to go into that shame and to do that healing work. And so that's all I want to say about narcissism. I do believe it can be healed if you're willing to do that deep work that it takes to heal that shame, because it really is associated with shame.
I actually want to add to that, actually. On a narcissistic, one behavior people talk about is gaslighting. And this is my truth. It might not be everybody's. And yes, I've experienced it, and it doesn't matter from who or when or what. It doesn't matter, but I've experienced it. So gaslighting is basically when I am convinced that my reality isn't true. It's completely different. Like I know this happened, but the other person basically convinced me it didn't. That's my understanding of gaslighting. And my truth on that is, I think that someone that has dealt with so much shame in their life, like you're talking about, might not be grounded in this reality. So what I experienced probably
might not is not the right word. They are not. Let's be honest. Okay, they are not, because oftentimes we're seeing it through, as a child who's shamed, we're seeing it through the eyes of a 5-year-old child or a 3-year-old child, whoever it is. So even as I grow into adulthood, I'm still seeing those experiences through the eyes of a 3 or a 5-year-old child. I literally cannot tell myself the truth about what happened, because I don't have that frame of reference as an adult to go back into that. Unless I have someone who can guide me, I really think it's very difficult. I'm not saying it can't be done, because I know people have done their own work without the assistance of anyone, but we were put on this planet alone, so we're never really doing anything on our own. Does that make sense? So there's always somebody who's guided us, or an experience we've had that has supported our beliefs or our experiences. So in some way we've been guided. But what I'm saying is, you can't, you're literally not framing that properly or telling yourself the truth, because you're seeing it through the eyes of your 3 or 5-year-old self. So you have a limited frame of reference. When you get to be an adult and you have an opportunity to look back on that with your adult eyes and your adult seeing, that's the work, right? That's the healing work that has to be done. I have to look at it, reframe it with an adult perspective, my 5-year-old self. But often those tendencies are so ingrained and they're so programmed into our mind, because every single choice we've made from the time that one thing happened has laid the groundwork for who I am in this moment. And so we've made every choice based off of that experience, whether as a form of protection or our reality. So we're not actually grounded in reality. What is the real truth that happened? I was a child. Something horrible happened to me as a child. That's the reality. But oftentimes we don't want to play victim. We don't want to be shamed for it. We don't want to even talk about it, because it was my fault in some way. And in reality,
what if someone doesn't believe me, or whatever?
Yeah, when you're a 3 or 5-year-old child, you think everything's your fault because your parents are the ones telling you that it is. And our parents aren't meaning to harm us. They're just doing the best they can with what they know. And so we've got it all mixed up. We literally we're not grounded in reality. So
I like that. Because I appreciate that.
Yeah, because reality is not, it was our 5-year-old self's reality. It's not our 45-year-old self's reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Dr. Joe Dispenza actually talks about this. He's like, pretty much like more than 75% of what we remember of the past isn't even true. So,
Well, and
like,
it's like the example of an elephant. And my mom's used this example before where she's like, look, here's an elephant in the room, and everybody is touching a different part of the elephant. So there's 5 of us in the room. And I've got to hold the trunk, someone's got to hold the tail, someone's got the leg, someone's touching the ear, someone's touching the side. And we all tell you it's, oh, this must be, a hose. I'm holding onto the nose. It's a hose. It has to be, right? Well, somebody else has a different perspective because they're standing at the tail, right? But when you put all those perspectives together,
yeah,
you realize that, oh, we're actually touching an elephant. So until we have all the
interesting.
perspectives, so say you all grew up in a family. This is my history. I grew up in a family of 6 children, right? All of us were in the same household. We had the same parents, right?
Yeah,
And yet all of us have a completely different experience. But if we put all the parts together, there's probably the truth of what actually
yep,
happened. But if you just have one person's perspective and they say, oh, my child was great and wonderful, I never experienced any kind of abuse, but the other one's like, well, I was abused, you were right there, you watched it happen, and they're like, no, I don't remember that, because they weren't the one getting abused. It wasn't as painful for them to remember that. Does that
yeah,
make sense? And so
it does.
we all have our own perspective of what actually happened. But if we can have someone come back in, which is why I think we talked about finding truth, you have someone else who can come back in and reframe it and go, well, did you think about this possibility? What if this happened? And so you were telling
Yeah,
yourself this thing happened, and in reality, what if it was this? And it doesn't have to be right. Like if I'm sharing a perspective with you of something that happened when you were a child, and say you got beat as a child, and I said, well, did you ever think about the fact that your dad had a really bad day at work and he just lost his temper, and
hmm,
you walked in front of him in front of the TV when he was trying to, relax, and he kicked your butt. You fell into the corner of you know, the wall and split your head open. Was he really being abusive? Or was he just having a rough day, kind of swatted your butt, you kind of fell, it was an accident. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. And so it was an
right.
accident, it wasn't abuse, right? Because that does happen. There's a lot of abuse that does happen too. So let's tell ourselves the truth about it, but let's also take into consideration a bunch of different perspectives, not to gaslight, like you were saying, to tell you your
Yep,
reality is something different than it really was. Because the only way is because you experienced it. You experienced shame as a 5-year-old. I guarantee we've all experienced shame when we were younger in one way or another. It's just how did we choose to deal with it and how did we choose to frame it? What makes one person frame it as a positive experience versus one person turn into a narcissist, have narcissistic tendencies later on in life? I don't know. It's the chemical makeup in our brain. It's the way that we respond to the world. It's our perfect divine timing lessons that we get to have throughout our life, so that we can learn more about who we are, because that's really all divine timing is, right? Is us just to go back and reframe some of our experiences and tell ourselves the truth about what happened. And when
hmm,
I say the truth, when I use truth in this context, I'm meaning tell ourselves the highest version of the story that I can tell myself about what happened. So tell myself the highest vibrational story. So if
yeah, without judgment, without, yeah, full accountability, all of that. Yes.
yeah, so what's the best case scenario that I can choose to believe about this situation? Because if I can do that, then I'm actually being appreciative for the bad things that have
Yeah.
happened in my life, or grateful versus um, versus not.
Yep.
And that's something we have to teach ourselves. That's not something that comes innate in everybody, but it's something we can learn to do. We can learn to go back and reframe things in the most
Yep.
positive light we can, which also leads into relationships. I can give my relationships the benefit of the doubt that they didn't mean to purposely hurt me when we were having this conversation.
Yep.
I give them the benefit of the doubt that they only meant to assist me, instead of me going, oh, they did that to hurt me, right?
Yeah.
And that's something we can learn to do versus um, get triggered by or be upset with and say, I can't handle this relationship anymore because you're mean to me. Like, what if I actually just gave you the benefit of the doubt in this situation, that you actually weren't trying to hurt me, right? And that's what I have a
And most,
tendency to do. But it doesn't always work out for the other person, because the other person sometimes still wants to be right. I still want to be right. I want to be right, right? We all want to be right, but I don't want to be right to the detriment of my relationship. I just don't.
Yeah.
It doesn't work
That's when
that way.
you might win the battle but lose the war there.
Yeah.
And I feel anytime that right and wrong really gets heavy in a relationship, that's what it ends up happening. The war gets lost. The relationship ends. So there's I speak with a really good friend of mine that is living with his twin flame, and some of the experiences that I've heard of how that person pushes his buttons or triggers him in ways he never thought was even possible. In the moment, he could choose to look at it like that or not. And he could either react or grow. And like, it's really awesome hearing these stories. And I'm not saying names, I'm not saying stories, but it's having someone so, I'm going to say, aware of what's actually happening in life and hearing some of the experiences. I don't hear all the details, but I hear like, well, this is what I did, this is how I reacted, I had to come back, I chose to do this different. And just hearing that and knowing that I'm not the only one that reacts. So gosh, now I don't have to beat myself up, I don't have to put myself in judgment. It definitely feels, this is a friendship relationship, but because of him and I having such a great relationship as friends, I believe he came in my life because of divine timing, because it actually allowed me to look and see how am I reacting, or am I creating, am I a victim here, how am I choosing to look at all this. And it's just interesting that our friendships, the people we choose to associate and how we talk to each other and learn how to grow together, can actually have a real bearing on our our romantic interests as well. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
For sure. One of the things I want to talk about too, really quick, is we talked a little bit about gratitude and we talked about appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we kind of mentioned that when we were chatting before we decided what topic
Yep.
we wanted to talk about. And
Mm-hmm.
gratitude and appreciation are often very close.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference that I see between gratitude and appreciation, and gratitude is usually like, I've experienced a thing, I'm grateful that it's over with. Like I made it through, right? Like I experienced a hard thing, now I can be
Yep.
grateful. I can look back on whatever it was I experienced with gratitude. Appreciation is different. Okay, so I mean, when you look, can you kind of see what I'm saying there? When I look back on something with appreciation, I'm actually appreciating the lesson.
Yep.
Right? And then I can either keep reliving the lesson by keep appreciating it more. Gratitude is almost like an ending. Appreciation, so like I'm grateful that something is over. And you're looking back with gratitude and like, I'm grateful that that happened so I could learn and blah, blah, blah. So I like the saying, whatever you appreciate, appreciates. So if I'm constantly in gratitude, appreciating the lesson, I'm a little bit nervous that I might be getting that lesson again. Does that make sense? Where if I'm appreciative, I'm appreciative of what I learned. And now I can appreciate the beauty in that and just keep appreciating that, not to repeat the lesson. Then I now focus on the thing that I want to appreciate. I want to appreciate that I'm experiencing more joy. I want to appreciate that I'm experiencing better communication.
Yeah.
I'm appreciating whatever. I know it's a really fine line, but when we talk about words and they have vibration,
Yeah.
appreciation is a little bit of a step up above gratitude.
I've never actually even considered that.
On the vibrational scale. Try that and let's see what happens.
I think I'm going to do a little research on this topic, and actually, yeah, I actually have some ideas I'm going to try. So
yeah. Well, because the more we're appreciative of something, the more it grows, right? And so the more we focus on something, the more it grows. So we can either focus on the lesson or we can focus on the outcome. Like, I know that sounds like it's almost a, are you there? Okay. That almost sounds like it's like I'm mincing words almost.
Yep.
But in reality,
plug my phone in. It's at 10%
Batteries.
all of a sudden.
Uh-oh. I'm probably video does that, or Zoom, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming. So, yeah.
Focus
What
on the
a great,
blessing of the lesson versus focusing on the lesson. I don't know if that's, I know it's very fine line almost, but I always want to focus on and appreciate the highest vibrational thought I can think about anything. I want to
yeah,
focus on that because I know that the law of attraction is all about what we think about, we bring about, right? So if we're monitoring our thoughts, which we're always in our head thinking, but one of the things that I wanted to give up on one of the new moons or full moons or whatever, you give up something. I wanted to give up negative self-talk. I think I actually did a video on my YouTube channel about giving up negative self-talk. So it was more about paying attention to the language I was speaking to myself.
yeah,
Because if I can give up that language of negative self-talk and always just tell myself the highest thought that I can think about anything, well, I
yep,
didn't mean to upset that person. You know, I really was striving for really clear communication, and it didn't end up working out that way. But that was my intention. And from here on out, I intend to continue to do that more. Like I'm just going to
yeah,
appreciate the lesson versus focus on the negative part of it that didn't work out. And I'm not going to
yep,
beat myself up for that part. I'm just going to say, well, I learned this and I'm going to focus on that. And now from here on out, I'm not going to experience that again because I
yep.
learned it. I don't need to repeat it again.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're just talking about communication, and then you start talking about self-talk, which is a form of communication. It's actually probably in my truth, that's probably the most important form of communicating. How am I communicating to myself? Am I talking to myself in a positive way? Am I saying the things that affirm the experiences that I'm creating in my life? So I like that. I like how that flowed together like that. It's beautiful.
I know that we've kind of gone all over the place a little bit, but I feel
Yeah.
like it's kind of woven in with
Yep.
divine timing because as far as divine timing goes, it's really honoring the journey wherever you are
For
because
sure.
one thing leads to another thing, which leads to another thing. And typically we associate divine timing with this big aha, right? But how often do we not go back through the chain of events that have happened
Yep.
that got us to this moment where we felt like divine timing was at play? I think divine timing is just when we recognize the fruits of all of our previous experiences, we call it divine timing. It appeared in divine timing. And in reality, all we can do is every moment is divine. So every
Mm-hmm.
moment of our life is divine timing. It's just we call divine timing that moment of manifestation when all of our efforts have actually produced the fruit, right? We,
Oh God. Okay. So yesterday, I gotta share this. Yesterday, first of all, let me rewind a couple years back. I started the whole process of becoming self-aware. Some people like to call it the enlightenment process. Just starting to really look in. And as I looked in, I got the spirit bumps. I was always having what I would call breakthroughs. I break through that terror barrier or whatever that next lesson is. And I actually realized I was kind of getting addicted to that. So I was always chasing the next one, chasing the next one. And yesterday I was sitting out on the beach. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold. I just buried my hands into the gravel, sand, shell mix, whatever it was. And I just sat there. And I'm like, I could meditate. I could do this. I could do that. Or I could just be and be still. And like this is when I text messaged you yesterday about the divine timing of it all. Is I just was in absolutely appreciation for everything that I've experienced up till now, because now I'm not chasing that breakthrough. Because we were talking about addictions. I was kind of addicted to that breakthrough. Because of that, I wasn't looking at other things. So yesterday, I just sat and I was with me. I was being with just me, um, not necessarily entertaining any particular thoughts, just the peace, the calmness of the water, the air. There was a slight breeze, like everything was so perfect in that moment, and nothing really had to happen. Like, so I'm a busy guy. Things have to be moving and shaking around me. That's how I am. So to experience something so calming and peaceful, that's what got me thinking about divine timing. So
Gotcha. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. My phone just said it disconnected from my Bluetooth. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Just as long as my computer doesn't disconnect. Oh,
That's funny.
yeah.
So
So
we probably are getting close to our time limit here.
we have been almost an hour. Yeah, I believe. So this is probably a good place to kind of wrap it up. But yeah, let's
For sure.
look at the divine timing is literally like every moment is divine. If we're willing to see, rather than calling one moment divine timing, they're all divine timing is that manifested moment when something that I really wanted, like I talked about at the beginning, all of a sudden comes into manifested form, right? Then we call that divine
Mm-hmm.
timing. It showed up at the exact perfect time. That $200 check that I was waiting for to pay that $200 bill showed up in perfect divine timing, right? Or whatever
Yep.
you call divine timing. But every event prior to that is what led up to that moment of divine timing. And that's what one of my mentors calls pre-paving. So you actually handle your future by taking care of your now. So however I'm showing up right now is going to determine my future. So if I'm positive in the now, my future looks pretty positive. If I'm negative in the now, I guarantee you in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to kick the cat. The cat's going to go screaming. There's going to be like this, do you know what I'm saying? There's going to be another ripple effect from that. So whatever is determined in my now is more likely going to determine my future. You're
I'm
laughing
only
about my
laughing
cat
because
analogy.
oh man, it's I was a trucker, so like, and the trucking industry is actually fairly negative. And when you're having a bad day, let me tell you, there can always be worse. If that motor is running, you're actually having a good day. So like, I get it. Like I've had days where like I started out in a horrible mood and it only got worse. Like
But we can shift
whether
it.
it
That's the
be
good news. We can shift it at any moment and go, okay,
exactly that's
wait, what is the
yep,
biggest, highest, most positive thought I could think about what I'm experiencing right now so that I
yep,
can shift my future moments? Because I remember
yep,
with my daughter being a teenager and having to get her up and get her ready for school, right? And she's like, I don't want to go to school today. I just hate it. I'm like, honey, the only thing you have control over is your attitude right now. And if
yep,
you can find anything to be positive about, let's focus on that. Let's focus on the fact that you get to see your
uh,
friends today at school. It may be that you're a little tired or that you're whatever, but you love your friends, right? And that is where you're going to see all your friends and they'll lift you up. And if you go into your day grouchy and ornery, I guarantee you, even when you see your friends, they're going to be grouchy and ornery. So let's see
yep,
what we can do to shift that right here so
yeah,
that we can, when you go into that, you can have a better attitude and then your ripple effect or your results from there on out are going to be better. So pre-paving our perfect divine moments,
yep,
our divine timing of whatever is all based on whatever it is we are doing today. And one of the things that I'm the most passionate about in my whole entire, like who I am, is raising the consciousness of people. And
yeah,
when I'm
for sure.
saying wake up, it's not because you're asleep and you're an idiot.
Yeah,
It's just there's always another level of consciousness. I mean, scientists are saying we only use a certain percentage of our brain. I mean, this has been proven, right? What if we actually awakened more of that and we were able to be more conscious? How is what I do today affecting what I do tomorrow? How is it affecting the people around me? How is it affecting the chair I'm sitting in right now? Um, even putting this video out, how is putting this video out there affecting, what is the ripple effect going to be and why am I doing it,
yep,
versus just going, well, it sounds good and maybe who knows what will happen from it. Well, I don't have an expectation. My literal only expectation with this is that I inspire one person, right? That I somehow share some bit of information gleaned from my own life experience that might give another person a different perspective that they could look at it from. That's literally
mm-hmm,
what I am so passionate about, is raising the consciousness and being divinely connected. Like those are my two passions, is if we can become divinely connected. And when I say divinely connected, I mean, how connected am I to the energy of all that is, right? Because if I'm connected to source or the energy of all that is, I have access to infinite intelligence. I have access to any piece of information that I need at any given moment. That even means if I
yeah,
reach out to this person who knows something, I literally have access to everything. So if I'm connected and listening, I can find the answer to anything I need. So as long as I'm in tune with that listening and saying, my soul is saying, I need to know more about this, all I have to do is reach out and I can find that information. So being connected to my divine highest self and being all of that in every moment, and then raising my awareness or my consciousness all the time. How much more can I learn? How much more can I inspire others? Because honestly, when I inspire others to raise their consciousness about how they actually affect everything else around them, makes my life easier. And so I'm doing it because I'm selfish in that way. I want my life to get easier. And if I assist other people to raise their awareness or raise their consciousness, all of our lives get easier. We affect each other in positive ways. I want my life to be easy. There was a time where I believed that literally I needed to create struggles to overcome them so that I could be worthy of love, because that was my paradigm. If I overcame something, then I was worthy of love. Well, what I know now is that I am love. I'm worthy by virtue of my beingness. And when I can get to that place where I'm literally worthy without having to prove anything, how powerful is that, right? Then there isn't anything that you can't do and nothing that you have to apologize for. Because what I know in my heart is that I do everything with love. I do everything with a positive intention to influence people for good. If that wasn't the result I was after, I would be living completely out of alignment. I'm not.
For sure.
I'm not. My intention is to create good. If your intention is to create power and control and manipulation, and that's what you're doing, you're in alignment with who you are. So alignment can be, I can be in alignment with the negative side, or I can be in alignment with the positive side. And either one is fine, as long as you're in alignment with whatever outcome it is that you're looking to achieve. That's manifesting.
I like that. I like that a lot, actually.
So again, it goes back to what result is it that you're looking to achieve? And am I in alignment with or on par? Is there anything in my life I get to work out such that it draws me closer to an alignment with that thing I'm looking to achieve? That's it. If there's anything out of alignment, I just got to take a look at it and go, okay, I got to shift that a little or whatever, and so that I can be more in alignment. Because what I'm learning is that the quicker I do that, the quicker divine timing happens. And it looks like I may have lost Dave. So I'm going to wrap it up there rather than, oh, is he back? There you are. Are you back?
Yeah, something's going on here. I don't know if it's the internet or we hit our hour mark. So.
Well, we're really close. And so I was just going to say, when I lost you, I was like, I'll just wrap it up here. We love talking about divine timing. Just remember the divine timing started when you were born. And every event that's led up to this, every moment where it feels like it's divine timing or something appeared just at the right moment, it's literally a gift to us. Divine timing is literally a gift to us from the universe, just saying, hey, you're on the right track. And
for sure,
this is something you are looking to experience. You're looking to have this moment of bliss or this moment of joy or this a moment of appreciation. Here it is. And every time we don't discount that, but we appreciate it, the more that comes. That's the law of attraction. The more we appreciate something, the more it appreciates. And so we can experience divine timing in every stinking moment if we're conscious enough to appreciate it. But oftentimes we get distracted by everyday little mundane things that happen, or, you know, and we live on this planet. There are physical realities that we get to handle, like food and water and dirty laundry and whatever, right? There are still things we get to handle as human beings. It really doesn't serve us to always live in a state of spirit or in those divine aha moments, constantly seeking out that next high, if you will. We have to have the contrast in order to appreciate those moments. So we can even be appreciative of the contrast that allows us to appreciate those other moments when we're in divine timing or we're in divine connection with all that is. So
for sure.
Anyway, you have any final thoughts you want to share?
No, this is actually, it's been an awesome conversation. I know I still got a lot to process still on all these topics. Every day I kind of look at all of this and
maybe go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Every day I just ask that question, what am I learning here? And because I asked that. That's why we got on that topic of divine timing, I think. So I think it's an important question to ask.
One of the next conversations we could have maybe in our next video would be about manifestation or manifesting.
I like it.
I have gotten in touch with some really cool, I feel like I've turned you on to some really cool mentors about manifestation, and there's a process to it. And it's such a simple process that we actually discount it because we're like, well, that's just too easy. I need to do some seance, and I needed to have some crystals around me, and I need to have some certain things that I say, and I need to go through this ritual in order to make certain things happen. And even in this process, it's not really like a process as much as it is just being consciously aware that I am always going from one thing to the next thing. And it's a simple process. And so it's so simple that I want to share it. And then what I've done is I actually tested it because I'm like, that just seems so simple. And in the reality, there was a step that I wasn't quite sure how I did this certain step. And I was like, and there's no explanation for the step. You just do it, or you just kind of, it's like a feel almost. You kind of just have to feel it. Which is kind of exciting. And so I really would love to go into the manifestation steps or the steps to manifesting, because I've been misinterpreted in the past too of like the law of attraction and how that works. Because a lot of, in my history, it was always like the law of attraction, it'll just fall in my lap. Like everything I want will just show up right here. And that's not true necessarily. However, it can be super easy, right?
Yep.
And so
that's a great conversation to have.
I would love to have that conversation on our next video, and especially when it comes to relationships, because I know there's a lot, it's a natural human tendency for us to want to couple or to have a significant other in our life. And how do we manifest that? I think a lot of people are really looking at how do I manifest this perfect relationship into my life, or at least find what I'm looking for. And we kind of touched on it a little bit, that it's about, you know, one part of it is about holding the highest thought we can about the relationship that we have, focusing on all the things that are good versus focusing on the things that aren't working, and then giving the person the benefit of the doubt when they say something that might trigger us, right? So that's a part of it. But I would love to talk about relationships and the law of attraction and manifesting and the steps to manifestation, because it goes along with divine timing, right? And everything happens in divine timing. And we wouldn't want to attract someone into our life when we weren't living our life in the best possible way we know how, because what happens is that relationship is probably going to trigger us a lot, so that we can either work together through those triggers, right? And sometimes we do, and other times the relationship breaks off because it just was too hard. Or and I hate to say that it's too hard, because nothing is really too hard, but there's a point where you realize that you're just doing this with each other, you know, playing the right-wrong game, if you will. And so we have to at some point break it off and just say, okay, we got as far as we could, and now we get to have a new experience. And that's okay,
for sure.
Because we're not going to learn how to show up in relationships until we have one to show up in, right? And so it's okay to look at any relationship we're in, even if we're not in a romantic relationship right now. We can look at our friendship relationships, or we can look at our work relationships, and how am I showing up in those, and what things are working for me and what things aren't. And so I feel like that would be I could talk about that even right now, but that would be really fun for us to go into on our next video. So that's a teaser for anyone who watches this video. If you're interested in learning more about that topic, we'll talk about that next time, and we'll go into a lot of that. And I would love for you, Dave, like in that next thing, to just ask a bunch of questions that I could share, and then interject experiences that we could like.
Yeah, we'll talk about all of that off camera. For sure.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, I'll end this recording. We love you guys. Like and subscribe so we can, you know, keep this going. And if you find it valuable, which we hope you do and trust that you do, we'd love to have you keep coming back for more. So anyway, we're signing off. We probably should think of a cute little catchphrase, but I don't know one yet. We'll come up with that as we go. But we'll talk to you soon, or see you soon.
Little rascals.
See you soon. All right.
It's still recording, Jen.
Is it still recording? Okay. And
It is.
I don't know if it's still recording. If it's still recording, I apologize. I'm gonna, oh, here we go.